Uhuru, my name is Coco Lewis. I am the International Secretary of the African National Women's Organization, ANWO, and I'm your MC for tonight's political education. African Women Must Lead with Yejide Oramila is a series of live monthly political education programs from the African National Women's Organization, led by President Yejide Oramila. Tonight's topic is Revolutionary Motherhood, a study of African women protectors of the people. We'll discuss the broader definition of motherhood and the legacy of African women as mothers, fighters, and protectors. There will be an opportunity to raise issues pertaining to this PE during the Q&A period, but please comment and engage throughout the program. African Women Must Lead is being multi-streamed live on Black Burning Spear TV and AMWO channels on YouTube, AMWO's Facebook page, and hopefully our Instagram page as well. Please take the time to like, share, and follow us on the platforms. And was also on Instagram, Twitter, and for the folks that will know the exact dates of our future streams, make sure you follow us and check our website for details. Uhuru, welcome, President Yejide.
Uhuru, comrades. Well, I'm so glad to be back after a month missing.
I know, right?
So glad. Thank you so much, and I'm really excited about this topic today. And
Me too.
so I appreciate you, Comrade Coco, for making that introduction. Thank you. So today's topic is revolutionary motherhood, and we wanted to do this topic because Uhuru Comrade Kwame, got it. We wanted to do this topic because number one, we wanted to really explore what it means to be a mother, and what, and that within the within the context of the African Revolution, like how we can really see women as birthing a nation free from oppression. So in this live stream, we're going to go over, I have some slides I'm going to show, and then we'll talk about these individual women, but we also are very aware that there are plenty of more women and examples of African women throughout history that we don't know the names of, and that we don't know exactly what their accomplishments are, but recognizing that African women have played an integral part in the forward progression of society in many different ways, as parents, as women in the community who take care of people, including children, who have cultivated food, who have cooked, who have done all these things to make sure society moves forward, been the caretakers, but also were birthing a nation through their action, militarily action, their stance in fighting for and securing the lives of millions over since we've been attacked by Europe, the lives of millions of African people on the face of the planet, and we owe so much to these African women. So I'm going to share a poem that was introduced to us by Comrade Jay, and it talks about, and we're going to talk about these women too in this program, but it's actually a program. It's called "To Our Female Veterans That Gave Up Their Motherhood" by Kiki Zegai, and it's regarding the Eritrean women who participated in the Eritrean Revolution. To our female veterans that gave up on motherhood, if anyone asks you if you count as a mother, tell them yes. You are the mother to my own children. If anyone asks you if you held a child and listened to his first breath, tell them yes. You heard the breath of all of our children. If anyone asks you if you count as a mother whose belly grew and heard a heartbeat, tell them yes, because you gave us a chance to have our own kids while you were building roads that took us to freedom. Tell them you made the enemy run for his dear life. Tell them that all the kids you did not have are free to run the landscape of our beloved country. Tell them that you as a mother counts million times over, even if your belly never grew, if the heartbeat was not growing in your being, or the baby cries did not fill the night through. You count as a mother to babies you do not know the names, to pain no one understands how deep. If anyone asks you if you had a boy or a girl, tell them you had many of each. If you feel that you have been robbed of the opportunity to be a mother, tell them that to all Eritrean children you gave the opportunity to be. You gave too much and received no honor to this day. Here's what heroes with a good heart, like you all, do. You give excuses when we forget you. You make us watch the best we can be. When we are at our worst, you lift us up. You are never busy, but always available for Eritrea. We wonder why we're willing to give up so much and gifts us with more. You smile and accept the love you think you have earned, and we just accept the love we think we are entitled to. I hope you will never give up on us, because I dread that day as one when the sky will become suddenly gray. Our heroes, our guide, our tomorrow is all of you. I am grateful. Kiki Sigai. She wrote this in December 8th, 2017. And I thought that was a really great way to start our program. And because I think that it really is a poem for all African women who gave their life, who gave their entire being to transforming society from one trajectory to the other, from direct colonialism to neo-colonialism. They didn't intend that to happen, but this is what happened. They saw that something was happening, something was wrong, that people were being oppressed, and they could not be a part of that oppression. They had to actually step forward and become leaders and warriors and changers and makers and shapers of that society. So we are going to talk about that. And I also want to challenge this idea of motherhood, that one of the things that I'm really um, careful about is making sure that, African women don't have to relegate ourselves to the birthing of children, right? Like, even though that's, forwarding of society, we want that to happen, all those things. But if a woman is not able to do that, and the stigma that comes along with it is tragic. And there are so many other ways that African women have contributed to our society. Some of the women that we're going to talk about have had children themselves, but also have made the path for so many other human beings, African human beings, to be born into this world and to be um, uh, to live, and it's freer than what they did before. So I just wanted to say that. So I'm gonna start out with I have a little slideshow for you, and I hope it doesn't. And I think that it's really important to do the slideshows because um, and they're gonna because obviously it helps keep me on tab, but also just really gives us a visual of the women that we are talking about, even though some of the visuals may be interpreted. So we're going to start in numerical order from the oldest that we can understand. Um, and we're going to start with Queen Njinga Mbandi, Queen Njinga Mbandi. And this sister, we've seen on Netflix, is a series called Nzinga. And one of the things that we know about Nzinga is that she was a so-called queen. And many depictions of her, when you see Nzinga, you'll see some sort of European crown on her head to signify her importance. But the queen, Nzinga, was a working woman's queen. She was a fighter. She was down in the dirt with the people. She was organizing and strategizing for the liberation of her people and the encroachment of the Portuguese in Angola. And there's some text on the screen, and you can read it as I talk, because I don't want to bore you with that, but not bore you, but I don't want to read verbatim. But what we know about Njinga is that she's an African woman who was a leader of a military institution in Ndongo in Angola, and she fought against the Portuguese for many decades. Her sisters were kidnapped. One of them died. She was moving her people from left to right. She had been defeated, then she's won. She had to make alliances with African other people in the area of the African community. She had to be a military leader. And what that meant for the people that was under her leadership, and pretty much for other areas, eventually for other areas in the same region, was that Njinga became this vision of freedom, this proprietor of freedom, that protector of the people. And one of the things I really want to impart on us is that when you have leaders that fight for your freedom and liberation, they're less and include you in that, empower you to participate in that, then there is definitely less likely that the amount of people that was going to die before is not going to die now. That you're going to be somebody who's going to fight for your freedom instead of being cowering to the oppressor. And Jingo was just somebody who, despite all of the challenges that she incurred, all of the strategies and all of the greater military might of the Portuguese army, was able to bring her people and bring resistance to this community, to this area. But more importantly, like when we look at Africa and all those, some of the stories that we come out of Africa, and this is early, this is like 1600s, this is like 200 years after the so-called Columbus discovered America and he left Europe to go land somewhere, that we have as early as this time, probably earlier, the collective resistance of African people to Portuguese colonial rule. And Portuguese was in Africa for the first encroachment, the first attackers in Africa, and had a long history of really terrorizing African people. And so from the beginning, we see African women like stand forward, like despite not being a meek or afraid to approach or afraid to fight. And I'm not saying that should be the vision that we have, but the colonial idea of womanhood is that you're supposed to just be this docile human being, particularly now today when there's this criticism of Black women being too harsh and too critical, too aggressive, all these other kinds of things, and the preferences for African women to be more soft. And that's a colonial biased idea of womanhood and of motherhood. Actually, is that's not what we understand as African women that our responsibility is, or how our character should be. That we've always been a fighter and protector and organizer of our people and ensuring our safety. And if that meant taking up arms and making hard decisions and strategizing when nobody else will, even when somebody else will, that we will do it. We will step forward. And Jinga was just one of those phenomenal examples of African womanhood and African motherhood, who just brought together so many people in Africa and Angola. And she is to this day an example of she was just today, I mean, even today, she's just this hero that's celebrated not just in Angola, but all throughout the African world. And one of the things I really love about African history is that we do celebrate African women. We do hold them up. And I mean, there's some contradictions in terms of whether or not we hold them up just as a figurehead, as opposed to actually trying to embody those things within society that they fought for. But that's something that we could talk about too as we continue to move forward. And so Queen Njinga, and if you have a chance to, and you got Netflix, go ahead and check out the mini series that's on there, to see all the complicated the situations that this queen, this warrior had to navigate. So at the same time that around the same time that Queen Njinga was fighting the Portuguese colonizers on the African continent, we have Dandara, who was fighting the Portuguese in Brazil, where that has the biggest African population outside of Africa. Brazil still does to this day. So Dandara was the wife of one of the greatest previously enslaved Africans, who had fought for and led African people to Quilombo, which was one of the most popular Maroon villages in Brazil. And she was somebody who helped to create Quilombo, not only that, she was someone who stood side by side by Zumbi and helped make political decisions. She was a warrior, she was a fighter, she was an agriculturalist, she was a mother, literally and figuratively. She was a helper to the community. She was a strategist. She knew guerrilla warfare. And these are all the things that you have to develop growing up in a hostile, violent society. You just can't be existing. You have to learn how to I don't know if you work if you I know that growing up in a violent society where the violence is primarily directed towards you and your people, that you have that to be docile or be uh, 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 established with your position is just not the way that we expect that human beings to develop. You actually have to develop skills and fight. And African women, we're seeing in the earliest part of the history that we do know, have been developing these things, have been observing the oppressor, have been observing the colonizer, and organizing against their oppression. And then Dara, she was a weapons specialist. She was somebody who could think out strategies. She also was a guerrilla. I mean, I think I said this already, but she was a guerrilla fighter. And I know that there were other quilombos in Brazil. And I know that there are many other examples of African women who have led it. But, Dendara is the one that people have spoken out about and have, dug up some history on. So this is the one that we're talking about right now. But I just want to reiterate that I'm clear that African women in all facets of society were participants and were probably the guerrilla fighters and probably the ones who are leading other quilombos around the country of Brazil, the colony of Brazil, sorry. And we just really want to pay respects to her and the work that she did to raise us up, because as an African woman, we now can get to talk about these women, and we actually have examples of African women who were not, who give us revolutionary inspiration, because when faced with the daunting task of resisting a mightier and more powerful military offensive, that you can win, that you can win and you can strategize even if you don't have the same sort of weaponry as they do. And I think also what was the limitation for the colonizers at that time is too their belittling or demotion of women, and not really seeing women as equal to them. And in African culture, what we're seeing is that, as long as you're able to step up and deal with, things, that you are equitable person and your contributions to society are welcomed. I think when we talk about the role of women in society and what we're trying to attain as African National Women's Organization to bring back, and how we understand patriarchy and how that was a deposit from European imperialism, European colonialism. This is what we're talking about. That I think the only example that some white people can point to in Europe is maybe Joan of Arc, and I forget which timeline that is, but we have many examples of African women who have been leaders and successors and warriors to defend the lives of African women and mothers. I mean African women and African people, sorry, African people. And not just in the sense of trying to protect June, but the African entire body. So we're going to talk about a group now, the Mino from Dahomey in Benin. And we might be familiar with this story because our sister um, made a film about it. Viola Davis made a film about it called The Woman King. And the Amazons is a term that was given to those African women by Europeans who came out of Europe because they knew of a story of women warriors somewhere in the jungles of the Amazon, and so they called them the Amazon. But these were called Mino, and they were all female regiment that was based in Benin in the kingdom of Dahomey. And They actually existed since the 17th century. So right around the time that Dandara is in Brazil and um, Jinga was in Angola. We have now in Benin, a French colony, the establishment of an all women's regiment. And I also want to say that these are the examples that we have of today, but there are probably hundreds of other examples of African women who are militarily astute, formed regiments, all these other kind of things. And this female regiment was known as the most violent, and that they also had some difficulty reacclimating to society once they were no longer fighting. At the conclusion of their hundreds of years of existence, that their bravery was something that could not be emulated by anybody else. And from what we know from the movie, and I'm sure this is true, that the women who participated in the Mino could not have children. They were forbidden to actually birth children on themselves. And and so for them, they when they were accepted or fought to be accepted into this rank of African women who were fighting on behalf of their kingdom, they accepted the identity of not having to give children. And this is in a society that values children, but the society also valued them as people who brought safety and security to their families in their region, and also were respected by all segments of the population. So, like we look at, you know, the equity between women and men, and how mostly is equalized when women become fighters, which I think is problematic too. Like, you know, yes, we gonna fight because we gotta fight in X, Y, and Z, but outside of that realm, when women just are in society, we then become subject to the backwardness of that society that says that women should not be fighters, that we should be homemakers, that we should be all of these things outside of the fighting capacity. Then women are not valued beyond that, and actually can be stigmatized, because here are these strong, you know, valiant women who have given their entire existence to fight and be strong for our community and for our people in the military aspect, but outside of that, they're not valued. And I think that's really atrocious. Um, but, you know, we find that in many cases where there are African women who are participating in these military exploits, and they still don't get the respect that they need inside of society when they're not in the military section. But here we have these amazing African women and girls who actually said, I want to fight. And that's not the vision that you get right now of Africa, right? Like, you know, you don't see that emerging on the continent of Africa. What we see and what the colonizer always wants us to see are African women and children as victims, and not as strong, not as fighters, not as people who are dominating and actually are fighting against oppression that also may exist that we don't know about. And when we do see slivers of examples of this, of African women giving birth to society that is free from the colonial, oppressive, dominating oversight of the colonizer and any other dominating force, that we see that there are many examples of African women who have emerged. And so I just, you know, just for my sake as a woman, as an African woman, like knowing that like when I grew up, Amazons were the idea of an Amazon was some white woman somewhere in the world. Even though I knew, like, somehow in the background there was black, it was Africans, like, but the Amazon and Africa, those two did not mix. They did not make sense. And so being able to see that this is my history, this is my legacy as somebody who now has chosen to participate in the African Revolution, and may at one point, at some time, be asked to be, not asked, but may at some point take up arms against our enemy. That knowing that we have a great example in the Mino and Jinga and Dandara and all these African women who actually said, I don't care what the I don't care um, what the physical and material might of these enemies are. I'm going to go forward anyway, and really we're able to make such an impact, a dent in the long stream of history that we now get to talk about them now. So yeah, the Mino. Um, Nanny of the Maroons. I'm glad I'm able to give y'all some history lessons. Thank you, Lauren. um, it's been a pleasure trying to put together these slides and talk about these African women because, you know, we might hear about them one off and one off, but what I'm doing right now is actually doing a timeline from the earliest to current, and as current as we can be at this point. So these are in succession. These are 50 years apart. These are 10 years apart. These are happening at the same time. So African women are like moving and shaking in different parts of the world. So here we have Nanny of Maroons in Jamaica, and this is 1720. Um, and she is um, also like, it's also curious too, before I'm stop myself, because it's also curious too, because um, we have these maroon communities from Angola. Nanny was from, believed to be from Angola, which is another country, and Nanny was believed to be from the Ashanti tribe in Ghana. And there were other maroon communities throughout the colonies. And when you see like where people come from primarily, you can see that even despite all of that, the objective was to run to the hills and set up communities and have successful communities that lasted for centuries. Um, doing the collective stuff that they used to do and was a part of their ancestral traditional knowledge when they were on the continent of Africa. Some of these Africans were actually, who were in the so-called New World, were actually born in Africa as well. So it's interesting that in these different places around the world, particularly in the so-called New World, U.S., the Caribbean, South America, that these maroon communities um, emerged and were very similarly governed. So in 1720, we have Nanny of the Maroons, and she established a maroon settlement called Nannytown. She was the leader of that. She had partners or partners, right? But she was the leader of the town. She was the establisher of this town. She was followed by and freed or escaped Africans who followed her leadership because she showed them strength. She was known by both the Maroons and the British as an outstanding military leader. They had to talk to this woman. These people who did not even value women as equal to them had to actually negotiate or talk to this African woman in all cases that we've just listed. In all these cases, had to negotiate and talk with African women when they wanted to stop some sort of when they wanted to uh, help, when they want to ease their bleeding. when Nanny and the rest of them was just like, yeah, we're going to keep going, we're going to gut you. They're like, oh, please stop. Please let up so that we can enslave more people. And these African women was just like, nah, I'm not going to do that. And so she actually was a warrior, but she also trained other African people to fight the colonizer as well. So these are like skilled women teaching other women and men how to fight physically, but also think. So they were using like logic and all the things that allow one to be a great, military leader. And at the same time, some of these people had children. Nanny did not have any children of her own, but she is known as the mother of Jamaica because of her and her rescuing and her providing safe haven for hundreds and thousands of Africans over time, really allow for the conditions where African people could emerge and be born and have some taste of freedom, and be able to fight for their freedom as well. So motherhood is an example. It's like showing your people what to do and giving them the knowledge of how to do it. And it doesn't just mean within this exchange between mother and child. This is an exchange between African women and the people. So we have so much to learn from African women. We have so much to get from African women. And if we are trapped by these colonial ideals about women, their thoughts, their ideas, their strength, their capacity, then we won't be able to see the true extension of African women and what they're able to contribute, what we are able to contribute to society. And that's why when we talk about fighting the colonialism and all of the things that come out of that, including patriarchy, that what we're talking about is dealing with the colonialism in ourselves, right? Decolonizing ourselves, which also means that more than just holding up these ideas of women in some far place. This is a great example. This is nanny. And just saying it as a matter of fact, but actually being able to take leadership from a woman, and being able to see her strategy, her mind, her entire being as somebody who embodies the freedom and liberation of our people, and being able to step aside while she is able to move forward as somebody who can actually accomplish the job. And this includes for African men and women. So like being a mother, being a mother is being a leader, right? And for us, and for Nanny, and for all the women we just mentioned before, they were mothers, they were birthers of our society. I'm gonna keep repeating that because we get people coming in and out. So I'm going to keep repeating that the African women are birthers, mothers, producers of a new society, despite the fact that some of these women have never bore children, but actually made the way for millions, I mean, generationally, millions of African people to emerge and be born. And that their existence and their stories that have come out from what we know has been a true example of how we should fight and how we should be. So, Nanny the Maroons is the mother of Jamaica, and one of the ways that they've immortalized her is actually by putting her on some money. There's statues, and she's in songs and all these other kinds of things, and that's great. But we can still talk about the contradictions in Jamaica that still exist, despite the fact that she is the mother of Jamaica. But these are just examples of women at the time who saw oppression, could not stand it for themselves or anyone else, and had to emerge as leaders to take control and do what was necessary to free our people. This is one like Solitude from Guadeloupe. This is the French colony in the so-called New World, and she's here immortalized in a statue on the island of Guadeloupe, and she was in 1772. So here we got French, the British, the Portuguese are all being battled with by these African people, and in many cases being confronted by African women as the leadership. So she was born into slavery, and she was, they call her the mulatress because of her mama was raped by some colonizer, but she, along with her partner, were brilliant strategists. They were establishers of maroon communities as well. She fought against the French colonial encroachment, and freed and went toward enslaved plantations with enslaved people were, and freed them and brought them out of slavery. And in this picture, she's pictured as a pregnant person, right? Because she was pregnant at the time that she was captured. Eventually, she was captured by the French, and her child was seen as property of the master that owned her. So they did not kill her until after she gave birth to this child, and the child as property was returned to the master, and she was killed the day after. And I think this is a really important image, but also really speaks to the theme of tonight's PE, which is that this woman, she was actually ready to kill herself at some point. Like she was like, they were gonna blow up her and her partner, and all of the people who had escaped had been cornered by the French. They in an armory, and they actually blew up the armory with the expectation that they would die in that. So she didn't, she was like, this baby ain't gonna be born until slavery, right? So she was prepared to kill herself, And and she actually did, but she survived. And when she survived, that's when the French got her, took her, had her locked up until she gave birth, and then they killed her after that she gave birth to that child. So even in this state where people believe women are at their weakest during pregnancy, she was like, I'm not, we liberty or death. And I think that statement is even more important when we talk about African people, not these little white people who were trying to fight against the British and from the United States, but liberty or death in reality meant that every single segment of our population fought against the enslavement of themselves and other people, rescued other people, and risked their lives to do that, including unborn lives. That's how serious the situation is. And, when I see the story I because it's the only one that I can find of an African woman who was pregnant at the time that she was engaging in struggles and actually was captured and died after she gave birth to her child that later became somebody's property. That it really is, it's a really leveling sort of story that helps us understand like what African women had to sacrifice, what African women would have done to ensure the freedom of themselves, even if that meant death, and the horrible conditions that existed obviously in slavery, particularly in the so-called West Indies and South America, that really, made it so that you either had to live or jump off of a cliff, because the cliff would mean that you like, I'm gonna be free some way or another, and I'm gonna take these suckers with me. And if I can't do that, then we're gonna do some drastic stuff. But these women and men took a lot of people with them, and for that we can only be grateful for their example. A long legacy of African people who fought against their oppressors, and that really helps us understand as African people today, like what we have to do. A lot of at this time, slavery had been in existence, for what, 200-300 years. And I'm sure slavery at the beginning was worse than slavery at this time, right? Like, and so now we think about how we supposed to be free at this time, but these people were just like liberty or death. Like, this is not the way. I remember, and they had a history, they had a memory of what it meant to be free and liberated people. And I think one of the contradictions that we're experiencing today is that we don't have a memory of what it means to be free. Our history in the US in particular starts at a place where we were enslaved, as opposed to at a place where we were actually free, then enslaved, and then everything that we've been doing from this point forward has been to ease the foot on our neck underneath this colony that continues to enslave us. So create conditions where we actually are better and feel better. But the fact is that we are still enslaved. We are still colonized. We do not have power over our lives. We are experiencing these pockets of oppression that only emerge when somebody decides to turn on the camera. But we feel this every day in our lives, that this crushing weight of oppression has to be released. When we see all the things that are happening in the African world right now, millions of African people being wiped off the face of the planet, millions of African people being wiped off the face of the planet in just months. Man, you have to know that we have to make a revolution. Like, we have to be able to say that, yeah, this peace for peace sake, or this peace because we don't want to get hurt and we want to protect our families. Which families are we protecting when millions of African people, our cousins, aunties, uncles, and stuff, are being wiped off the face of the planet? And it's our responsibility to keep that legacy alive, that tradition alive. And so this is part of that process, particularly for African women, to see ourselves as the liberators that we are, as mothers who are birthing forth new societies, and what it would take to make that happen. That we have to organize ourselves and be organizers of others as well. So this is one of my, Harriet, General Mama Harriet, but also General Harriet Tubman, who was born into chattel slavery in the United States. This is 1820, which is about 100 years after Nanny of the Maroons in Jamaica was battling the British there. And Harriet, as this, she organized people, but she mostly organized herself, and she actually went back and go get them. She was Sankofa. She was like, I'm here, but I'm gonna go back and go get them, right? And that's what Sankofa means. And she is somebody who led military regiments. She was someone who helped African soldiers who were fighting to supposedly get their freedom in the Civil War in the United States. She was someone who rescued hundreds, thousands of African people from slavery. On her own, hundreds going back and forth to the so-called the U.S. South, but also liberating African people from enslavement through her participation with her collaboration with the U.S. military at the time to free Africans who were enslaved in the South as well, and rescuing thousands of African people and destroying millions of dollars in today's terms of property of the colonizers. She was somebody who organized constantly for African people. She didn't have no children, y'all, but she took care. Even this, she felt the weight and responsibility of rescuing these strangers who she did not know. But she also took care of her sister's children, her brother's like her children that wasn't her family. She was also their protector and their caretakers. So, and on top of that, right, even in her old age, she was also creating institutions that would take care of elderly Africans in the so-called north of the U.S. So this woman really deserves every single prop that she gets, but also is somebody who allowed for life to be born. She gave life to so many people. She was an inspiration. And at the time that she lived, I'm so glad for this, that she was honored during the time that she lived, and could never, ever, 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 ever be somebody that we forget, because her example is something that I think we lack. People like to hold up Harriet Tubman, but most people would not go back and go get them, would risk their own lives, their own freedom, just so that they can free other African people. And, that to me is the example of like what it means to be a revolutionary. Like, what did Chase said? Chase said the greatest love that you have is for your people. I don't think that's the right quote, but that's the greatest revolutionary. Being a revolutionary is the greatest expression of love, because you have love for your people and you want your people to be free. And that's the greatest love that any African revolutionary can give. And this woman actually fought, engaged, organized. She actually also helped what's the white man's name that was trying to make the raid on Harper's Ferry. But she also helped to organize people to that raid, even though she did not participate. She probably had some other things to do on the liberation front. But this woman, really is somebody that is a mother to generations, probably my mother, probably my ancestors, probably your ancestors. This is a person who, despite not having any children, we all feel that she is our ancestor, and she is somebody that really gave birth to not only more people to be born, so to speak, but she gave birth to this idea, right? And during this time, she was like the first woman, so to speak, in the colonies to actually do these things. She gave birth to this idea, this example that our responsibility is not just to organize and do functions and things like that, but our responsibility is to engage, make dangerous decisions, plan, strategize, solve problems that require us to sometimes put ourselves in the middle of those things and to lead people away from the things that are harming us in a physical and literal sense. So, I just, shout out to Mama General Harriet Tubman. So here is Ya Santua. I really love this story because she is uh, uh, um, from Ghana. And one of the stories that I love about her is that there was, the king at the time, who was her brother, I believe, was just like, he was scary. He didn't want to deal with the British. And she was just like it. And she was like organizing women in the community. And she was just like, listen, these brothers out here, scary. But we got to go. Like we got to go deal with this problem that is impacting our ability to live, and we are not going to cower, and we are going to move forward. So here we have Ya Santua, who really engaged in military combat with the British for years. And there's a story of the Golden Stool, and where, they took the Golden Stool because this is the stool of which the king were to sit on, and the British took the Golden Stool, and she had to go get that stool, and then all this stuff. But this is around, since Harriet Tubman was in 1820, so this is around 80 something years later. And then when Ya Santawa decided that she was going to step forward, because the men who were the leaders of the military was like, nah, she was actually a middle aged woman. She was just like, so it's not always the young. It's always like it's always the people who have the most to gain. And she was actually a part of the so-called monarchy. And she was just like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to allow the British to take all that of that. We're not going to allow them to embarrass us in our homeland. We're not going to allow them to treat you like you're nothing, you African king. We're not going to allow them to treat our communities and our children, or even steal our children and our communities, and treat us like we are slaves in our homeland. And here she is an actual picture of Mama Ya Asantewaa, warrior, in all her regalia, rifle in hand. And, just imagining her leading African women and men to fight the British on many occasions, And so, she is somebody who we could all use as an example to show. And I'm just like, again, I'm repeating myself, but throughout, like, we are seeing the connection from year to year, decade to decade, you know, century to century, that these African women emerge in history as fighters, resilient mothers, birthers of society, transformers of society, children, having given birth to children or no, but allowing for society to emerge and to be free, and instilling a sense of pride and fearlessness within a community. Because when somebody sees an African woman emerge and like, I'm not scared, even men, they be like, oh, she ain't scared. Why am I scared? You know what I'm saying? So like, here we have this badass working class African woman who was like, we're not going to deal. And I want to say working class, because this idea of queens, monarchy, all of that stuff that we understand is for the most part, the idea that we get from Europe, like these queens and kings who don't do anything, who have all these servants and all these things. And to a certain extent, that happened in Africa too. But we also know that the royalty in Africa, the so-called royalty in Africa, were also in the field, were workers, were also not exempt from duties and responsibilities and work that required for the forward motion of society. And so when we see an African woman who's supposed to be a part of the royalty say, F that, I'm gonna I'm gonna move on these people who are encroaching on our territory and becoming more and more of a threat, then I have to do something about it. So here's Ya Santua, and yeah, check her out, find out more about her. So I'm gonna go to the Garveys. I'm gonna go back and forth because there's two. There's two. And if you blink, you might. Oh, sorry, there we go. If you blink, you might not realize that there's two Amy Garveys. And they both are badass. So here we have, in what was it? Um, in the late 1800s, Ya Santua is emerging. I think she was born in 1860. And then Amy Ashworth Garvey was born in 1897. So we have a continuation of African women being born during this time, like all throughout history. So we can continue to go. And so Amy Ashworth Garvey was helped Marcus Garvey establish the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and the African Communities League in Jamaica, West Indies, or Caribbean, and then came with him to New York, where he actually had the full measure of his entire career, and where he was able to establish over 11 million members across the world. So Amy Ashwood Garvey ain't no punk. Like, she was just like, I'm there. And not only was she just somebody who was just a dutiful wife, which I'm sure she was also the person who founded the Negro World newspaper, which is the paper that was distributed to all those 11 million Africans around the world. She was also its first editor. She was the director of the Black Star Line steamship that Marcus Garvey had established at this time, which is around 1919, 1920. And she and eventually when she left, when Marcus and Garvey and her split, she went back to Jamaica. She also was doing work there in Jamaica. She didn't just stop her experience as a revolutionary, as somebody who wanted to transform society and improve the conditions of African people. She continued to move forward and even participated in so-called the establishment of the Pan-African Congress, but we'll talk about that. Talk about that later. But she was a badass woman and an African leader for sure. And then we have Amy Jacques Garvey, who I guess she was actually older, right? So she became the editor of the Negro World newspaper. She was when Marcus Garvey was imprisoned by the U.S. government on mail fraud. She became the leader of the UNIA, and she organized and coordinated all of the UNIA's business. And she was not just some behind the scenes bookie person. She was giving speeches. She was actually contributing to so much of the work of the UNIA, establishing leadership, and these millions of people actually led her. And we've seen, I'm sure that some of you have seen the pictures of the UNIA, these beautiful marches. This is 1920s New York City, where African people were still oppressed, but still had a little bit more freedom than they would have, say, in the South. But these were, they had an African conference at the Madison Square Garden, one of the second iterations of Madison Square Garden that was a little bit smaller than the one we see today. And this is where she was helpful in establishing the African flag, not the Pan-African flag, the African flag, which is the red, black, and green flag. So these Garvey women are also featured on our conditioner, Black Star conditioner, and from the Colonnades. Little plug there. So go and get you one, and you'll be refreshed and invigorated by the conditioner, as well as you have been by learning about the Garvey, the Amy's of the UNIA. So we all are in the world, so we understand what's happening right now with the attack on the Gaza and Palestinian people by Israel. And one of the things that I didn't know about until recently is this sister, this African woman born in Palestine, Fatima Bernawi. And she was one of the first women to be in prison for fighting for the liberation of Palestine. Her mama was Palestinian and Jordanian. Her father was Nigerian. She was born there. She is a Palestinian true and true, and African warrior, and really organized for the first. Her experience was shaped by the Nakba, which is where Israel. She was born before Israel became Israel. So her experience and her resistance was really shaped by this foreign occupying, dominating figure coming into Palestine, taking up territory, ruining a better way of life, and taking from themselves and and being a parasite, and also creating violence that were carried out against Palestinian people. And here this young African woman was experiencing that, and she was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna allow this to happen. And she joined Fatah, and they carried out attacks against the Israeli Defense Force, and she eventually was imprisoned for life, but she only did 10 years. And after that, she continued to fight on behalf of Israel, still making behalf of Palestine, my bad, and just died recently last year. And she is just somebody that I think, that if you didn't know about, you need to read about, but just the strength and resilience. We everywhere, y'all. Not just where this colonizer took us, but also everywhere in the world. And so when we see Black women, African women emerge from these places in different struggles, always in different struggles, it doesn't matter. Like we're gonna emerge as fighters. It doesn't matter. And so she's just what I've learned is that she's just a strong figure, not just for African women, but for every colonized woman who are fighting their oppression. Um, and just wanted to include her in this slide. And there's probably more, but like I said, I just found out about her, and I'm really inspired by this because when we look at people saying that, I don't know who's saying this now, and I hope they're not saying it now, but people saying that African people don't have a stake in this fight against Palestine and Israel. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's a long history, and the party has even done a webinar around, African people's, support of the Palestinian struggle since it was created, since Israel created itself, and since it started to attack Palestinian people. So just knowing that we had, and we still do have, African people who are participating in the Palestinian resistance is important, but also that this African woman was one of the first people to actually participate in the resistance to Israeli domination of Palestine is also this really uplifting. Oh, we're back. Okay, so here we go. We're running out of time. It's a lot of women, a lot of examples that I'm giving, right? So I got to wrap it up soon because we got to do some questions and answers and maybe contributions and feedback from the folks. But I'm going to read this verbatim because the Eritrean Revolution was to rid itself from the oppressive nature of Ethiopia and its colonizer, Italy and Britain. And women were not mere contributors to the Eritrean struggle, but fundamental to it. 30% of the EPLF was comprised of women, and many served in frontline combat roles. Others were in administrative positions, logistics, or intelligence. The same was true of the ELF. There was scarcely a single aspect of the liberation movement that was not shaped by the contributions and experience of Eritrean women. And the poem that I read at the beginning, if you missed it, look back at it once we finish the live, was a tribute to Eritrean women who sacrificed made their own desire to have their own children in order to bring forth the situation where they actually was going to see freedom. This was going to rid themselves of this oppressive nature, and recognizing too that when women, we talked about this at one of our previous lives, is that when women participate in revolution, they do so so that they can have a better life. And if you're being oppressed by an oppressor, then if you're being oppressed by an oppressor, then okay. Am I speeding up? I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments, but I like it. I'm getting to see it. If you're being oppressed by an oppressor, then usually that really impacts the so-called, certain sectors of the community, usually African women, children, LGBTQ folks, and all that. So they have motivation to participate in this as well. One, because they want to see their people free. Look in here. One, because they want to see their people free, and the other because they want to experience something different from what is laid out for them in traditional society, which may be backwards practices. It doesn't make any sense that limit the roles of women in those societies. So being a part of national liberation struggles, it has been really helpful for liberating African women in those particular areas. So Lauren says that in relation to Fatima Bernawi, who was born in Palestine, she mentions that Palestine is technically in northern Africa. The whole Middle East is. Yes, we are everywhere. Yes, I know. The Middle East is a creation. And the split of the canal, I can't remember the name of the canal now, that the Suez Canal, I believe, right? That connects Africa to the so-called Middle East was split because by Europeans because they wanted to be able to get through, trade routes and all that stuff. So I'm very aware that the so-called Middle East, in my view, is a part of Africa, and was created by the colonizers, because the same way that Nigeria was created for Britons, because they wanted to control these areas. And what we're seeing now with the emergence of the so-called Arab population is that the fact that Arab people are not allowing themselves to be controlled, and the emergence of Israel and Saudi Arabia and some of these other neo-colonial states is about controlling a population that does not want to be controlled. But here we have Eritrea, who's also in East Africa, and these women who participated in a 30-year struggle. 30% of the military population were African women in Eritrea, and they were valiant struggles. And they too had to deal with some of the contradictions that happened coming back to civilian life, things that they had experienced within the military, such as sexual freedom and being able to fight and win and struggle, didn't exist in the general population. So that's another thing that I want to do a PE about, just looking at that and the results of that. But yeah, Eritrea Revolution, these women and their contributions to the liberation of Eritrea is insurmountable. And the and I think what they also represent is that despite like African women are almost like, I'm confident that African women are more than more than half of the African population, period. So what that tells us is that you have to be involved in the transformation of society. You have to be involved in all elements of the transformation, and so do African men, right? So that's why there's no basis for these gender roles, because if a woman is willing to fight, and a man is willing to fight, a man should be able to take care of children, grow some fruit, things like that. Like there's no, whatever society needs to emerge and to prosper, we all have to do our work to make that happen. So I appreciate, learning about the Eritrean Revolution and the women that participated in this. Where are we on time? Oh, I had some other pictures that I wanted to show. I forgot to click. Here's just some more pictures of these African women in Eritrea. I talked about Claudia Jones a lot in my last presentation, so I'm going to let y'all go back to look at that. But she's also just an amazing example, somebody who's led and continued to have a legacy that is making deep impacts on African people in the UK and even still here, and just into revolutionary thought and ideology. Like, she was one of the first women that I saw or heard of that talked about African women's struggles within the context of anti-imperialism. And like, that to me makes her my auntie. You know what I mean? Like, so like, she family. So like, being a mother, being a person who birthed these ideas and contributes to, these thoughts and ideology is really important. So thank you so much, Claudia Jones. Muthoni Karima was the first first African woman field marshal in the Kenyan Land of Freedom Army. She just passed away this year. And one of our membership levels is dedicated to her. But she is, this is her in her older days and her in her younger days. And she fought right next to Dedan Kimathi against the British colonial rule in Kenya. And has been a valiant hero, where there were, I think she was the only female field marshal in the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. And that speaks a lot to her dedication and her willingness to go ham, as an expression that my daughter might say. So Ella Baker, this woman is referred to as the mother of the civil rights movement for so many reasons. So many people have learned from Ella Baker. She was one of the women who contributed to the building of the NAACP, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which is where today her organizing, her commitment to that has helped so many different organizers develop revolutionary political strategy to fight and win on many different levels. So she acquired a nickname. Her nickname was Fundi, and it's a Swahili word that means a person who teaches a craft to the next generation. So if I'm a Fundi too, like you know what I'm saying, like a craft is teaching revolution or teaching my baby. You know what I mean? Like so, this um, this is just another example of an African woman who despite all of the challenges and in 1960s South United States, where we had no choice but to be organized and committed, this African woman emerged as one of the leaders of the so-called civil rights movement, and was so instrumental in training up so many young people through the SNCC organization. And our chairman was a member of SNCC as well and knew Ella Baker. So when we think of the legacy of revolution, we have to make that connection between Ella and Chairman and so many other African women that have contributed to just so many amazing leaders in our nation. So we got Fannie Lou Hamer. I don't want to skip over these two. I'm gonna pause, and if we have more time, I'll do the rest of these slides. But I know that we have to get some announcements in, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now, and then come back to this Uhuru Comrade. Coco, take it.
Uhuru. So, as Yejide said, we're on our way to the question answer section. So please prepare your questions. Remember, please share your name and location, and then your questions. And we're going to go ahead and go into the announcements. So I'm trying to keep this fast because I really want President Yejide to be able to finish up her slides, because like she got a couple more people that I know I'm waiting for. Uhuru. All right, so we call on African women worldwide to join the African National Women's Organization. We're the only anti-colonial, anti-imperialist revolutionary organization for Black women. We have members in Africa, Europe, Latin America, and all around the United States. AWML is leading on everyday issues concerning African women. We are not just on the internet, we are on the ground in our communities, organizing for African liberation. Join the International Collective of African Women, building the revolutionary capacity of African women. To learn more about membership and to join AWML, visit amweluhuru.org/join. Show your material solidarity with the work of the African National Women's Organization. We have big things planned next year, like beginning to work on our headquarters, organizing a flea and farmers market to support African economic development, events, and travel. We are an organization of the African poor and working class, so we need your support to make these projects happen. If you can't become a member, consider becoming a sustaining donor, with donation levels starting at $5 a month to start or renew your support today. We also set one-time donations of any amount. So don't wait until the program ends. Start now to donate. You can go to amweluhuru.org, donate, or Cash App $AMWELUHURU. All right. So, I'm representing Wear Your Politics with AMWEL. So AMWEL's shop features t-shirts, sweatshirts, travel bags, mugs, hoodies, and even socks. So profits from the merch sales support the campaigns of AMWEL, including #ArrestCPS and Uhuru Kijiji Collective. And become a decolonizer and support AMWEL's economic development project, Decolonize Here in Body. Decolonase Hair and Body are natural personal care products, tongue twister, that highlight ingredients and traditional care practices used by indigenous people all around the world. In addition to featuring images and quotes of African revolutionaries, they are good. From butters and conditioners to oils, Decolonase has you covered from head to toe, literally from head to toe. Make your next purchase of skincare products or body care products from us at decolonase.com. And if you're in the DC metro area, purchase from us in person starting January 2024. Hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. Support the Uhuru 3 in our fight against the U.S. indictments. Defend the African freedom struggle. Defend the African liberation struggle. Defend the Uhuru movement. To find out more on how you can support, go to handsoffuhuru.org. Now, if you enjoyed tonight's program and would like to help us produce shows in 2024, volunteer with us. NWO is looking for producers, interpreters, and chat moderators for future broadcasts and for our convention. Email us at info@nwouhuru.org if you'd like to share your skills. Now, join us again this Sunday, December 17th at 2 p.m. for our monthly interview, news, and analysis program, The Breakdown. We will be joined by Alikia Ngoma when our topic will be Haiti and other African news. This is a special one because our annual producer, Jay Ameche, and I, Coco Lewis, will join President Yejide on screen with our perspectives and news from the African world. Register on our event site, annualmem.wildapricot.com/events. Also, register today for Anwo's Harriet's Daughters Book Club, which is a monthly virtual book club where Black women and femmes discuss books that center on African liberation themes. Whether you read or not, come join us for a great discussion as we will be discussing Asada, an autobiography, and that's going to be this January 14th, Sunday, 3 to 5 p.m. And get ready to take a stand. Get ready, okay? Get ready to take a stand. Annual calls on African women and our supporters worldwide to attend our annual Black Women's Convention. The 2024 theme is taking a stand against imperialism, colonialism, and neocolonialism. African from every city, town, province, country, island, and village must attend this convention. Discounted early registration is available now until December 30th. The convention will be hybrid, online, and in person in St. Louis, Missouri. To find out more and to register, go to convention.anwouhuru.org. Don't wait. Register now. Uhuru. Let me go ahead and bring President Yejide back on the screen. There you go.
Thank you, comrade. First of all, we want to apologize that we weren't on Facebook today. We trying to rectify the contradiction, and people who are on our Facebook probably are missing out, and we plan to be on Instagram, so we had some issues with connections, but we'll figure that out for our Sunday podcast. But thank you so much, comrades, for the announcements and letting people know. We know we got a lot of links in that chat, y'all. It's like you gotta pick one. You gotta pick one. But there are so many.
You can always just go to the AWML website and access everything. Just click around.
The AWML website got all the links for you, and you can donate, become a member. You can find our events, all the things. Go to our AWML website. But
AWML.org.
We want to encourage folks who are looking now and looking later. So if you can't be a member, whether you're not an African woman or some other reason why you can't be a member, then consider donating, and becoming a sustaining donor, because we got a lot of stuff that we got to do, and we need resources, y'all. That's for real. And we are a 100% self-sustaining organization. And thank you to so many of the people who have become members. Thank you so much to people who have donated so far and have purchased our products. We appreciate you so much, but we want more. So bring your
Yeah,
folks to the folks, tell them to donate this giving season, so to speak, and just
and
help
look,
the African National Women Organization be stronger than what we have been financially, so that we can make all these things that we have. They gonna happen, but they could be doper. They could be more amazing if we had some more resources that we didn't have to partition. So
right.
so I appreciate all of that. Join, become a member, donate, buy our stuff. It's all great, all great, all great, all great. So this seem like there's a lot of questions. I can go back into the rest of the slides, but I appreciate Lauren, who confirmed that they are going to be registering online for early registration, and I would recommend
All
that we
right.
do that. Get that little. It was $15 online and $25 in person. And so that's a steal, I think, for this kind of convention. It's going to be a dope convention.
Our convention's dope every year.
It's going to be
Like,
doper. Like, yes, you are missing out if you don't come to our conventions. Like, it's like one of the best conventions,
yeah.
I think. And we
Every year
always
it gets
have,
better.
it gets
And,
better. It's
and,
like,
and look, and we top neck last year.
listen,
I mean,
top
well, this
notch,
year
top
technically.
notch. Yeah, we have dope plans. We're inviting everyone, and inviting African women from all over the place to participate in this convention. And we got some amazing graphics coming out soon, and we are really excited about taking a stand against imperialism, colonialism, and neocolonialism, and organizing African women who also want to take a stand against that. Because, like I said earlier, when we look at the things that are happening in the world, the way the face of African women and children who are being targeted and victimized, and African people who are being targeted and victimized, you should want African women to be involved in the liberation struggle. We should encourage, if you're an African man or somebody else who's watching this, you should encourage your mama, sister, auntie, daughter, and everybody else to participate in watching this as well. Donate on their behalf, create a membership on their behalf, or something like that, because the more African women that we have, who are participating in this or who are learning more about this, the better. Because, like I said, we more than half of the African nation, and we got to be organized. And so this convention is a part of making that happen. And we're excited for it, and we can't wait for the results of it, which we feel is going to be like, it's such a pivot. I don't want to put everything in it's such a pivot from what we've done before, but it's a good pivot, and it just shows development of African women, and the forward thinking that we're doing to strategize to make our liberation happen on so many different fronts. So I'm excited about making it happen along with my fellow comrades who will be there online or be there in person. We got some commitments. I got some commitments on social media. Like, if y'all watching us on social media, we got some commitments. I'm gonna hold you to it, that you're trying to be there in person this year, which we want to hold people to, because the more people that we have on the ground, the more dope it is. So um and Lauren, thank you so much for being a active participant, and everybody else too, who I can't see because you
Yeah.
haven't chatted with us in a minute. But thank you so much for watching our program. I'm gonna jump back into the rest of the slides, because I didn't want to skip by these amazing African women. And then, if there's any questions, comments, or feedbacks, then I'll see them as Comrade Jay puts them up on the screen. And don't forget to go back up and click on those little links. Don't wait till the program ends. You can get started on membership today. You can get started on your donations together. You can buy some stuff while you're looking at this. All you gotta do is listen. You know what I'm saying? So don't be afraid to scroll back on up before the last the last a few minutes of this program. But here we go. So I wanted to jump back into the slides and talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a voting and women's rights activist, community organizer, and leader in the civil rights movement. So at the same time that Ella Baker was doing her thing, Fannie Lou Hamer She was the working class, y'all. Like, she was working class. She was from the class, and she organized and was a strategizer, mobilized people to do things and to vote and to fight for their rights to vote, which the right to vote still is something that is being fought for today. That's how you know when you slave, when you colonize, when there was an active, conscious effort to prevent you from voting in a democratic process. Um, and that these people who fought for this right to vote, but not only the right to vote, the right to vote is the right to make decisions for oneself. And the belief is that if you can vote, then you're able to now make decisions that will impact the lives of African people. We know from history that that's not always the case, that if you vote for somebody black, they may not be on your side, but if you vote for somebody who said that they're going to be for black people, they also do, not may, they also do turn on you and don't really commit to the things they said that they were going to do. But Fannie Lou Hamer was somebody who participated and organized Mississippi's Freedom Summer along with the Student Nonviolent Coordinated Committee. And those of you who understand what the Mississippi Freedom Summer was, is that we had these young people not scared to go to the South, and not just the South. We talk about Mississippi, where if you Mississippi, and go knock on doors. They from New York, they from California, they from all over the place. White people, black people, organize these young people to go to Mississippi to organize black folks to vote and for a democratic process. You understand what I'm saying? And that was dangerous. And we have these, and you have to be an incredible leader. You have to be an incredible leader to convince young people sometimes to do this. And Fannie Lou Hamer was one of those, and also had a deep impact on the protection and progression of young people. And that's why we also established her as a mother. She may have also had her own children. I don't know. But when we look at, I claim all these women as my aunties. You know what I'm saying? I claim every single one of them as cousin, auntie, mama, general, somebody, because they are who we as African women, but as African people, look towards for leadership and example, and they've laid the blueprint for us. So, just incredible organizer, activist, resilient, sacrificer, um, and just somebody who just put her life on the line for African people. So Asada Shakur, she actually gave birth. Like, this is a woman who was nearly killed. She was part of the Black Liberation Front, which is an offshoot of the Black Panther Party, and participated in doing activities of liberation for African people, and was incarcerated. And we're going to read this book, right, Conrad? Yes, Coco. She talked about it already in the announcements, but we're going to be reading Asada's autobiography at our next book club next month. And one of the stories in it was that, she wasn't pregnant when she went to jail, but she was pregnant and gave birth in jail, because in an opportunity where her and I think it was Matula Shakur were in a room together. They had relations, and it's like, if they gonna die, they gonna at least give birth to some child. You know what I'm saying? So she ended up being pregnant and grateful, and she ended up having the baby while she was incarcerated. But Asada Shakur is a mother, not just to her child, but she's a mother to all of us as an example. It's really incredible that we hold up these women, these amazing, strong African women who sacrificed so much, gave so much of their lives, and she was willing to live and die for her people. And but she also is an example. Even if she had died, she's an example of an African woman who was just like, liberation, freedom, was it freedom or death? And was willing to accept either one, in the act of liberating herself and her people. So Asada Shakur is definitely a mother of our people. And Nomzamo Winifred Zaniwe Mandikizela. Oh, I think I did that right. I'm gonna do it again. Namzamo Winifred Zaniwe Mandikizela Mandela. So this is Winnie Mandela, who was the wife of Nelson Mandela when he was incarcerated, and did most of the leading of his campaign to free him from prison. And after they divorced, Winnie Mandela, still this conscious revolutionary, this woman that wanted to transform society, was actually targeted by people in the community as somebody who was a zealot and all this other kind of stuff. But everything that she said was really like, South Africa ain't free. I don't agree with Nelson Mandela and this Peace and Reconciliation Act stuff. African people need to have control over that. It is not, and she would disagree with the ANC. And this woman was just like, she was not, despite the fact that she was living in occupied Azania, South Africa, that she was not satisfied with the conditions of African people in this country, and wanted to see the freedom and liberation totally from the grips of colonizer and neocolonial rule, and was very vocal about it up until her death. There's a picture, and I wish I would have pulled it now that I remember, of chairman and a former comrade, Gaida Cambone, which is a picture with comrade Winnie Mandela when they were in South Africa in like the early 90s, I believe. And she had them to her home. This is an amazing African woman who is considered the mother of South African revolution, the mother of South Africa, the birth of the African leadership in the country. And there's a lot that can be said about that too, in terms of the conditions of African people there now, and what is definitely needed to happen to move the needle in making sure that African people are truly liberated, not only in occupied Azania, but in the rest of Africa. But she was somebody who championed that, and would not rest and would not be quiet when it came to that, and is really one of the mobilizers. There's a huge African women's presence in the Pan-African Congress of Azania. There's also a huge African women presence in the ANC, despite the fact that these may be neocolonial organizations, but she was instrumental in helping to organize these things and recruiting African people to these organizations. So Mama Winnie Mandela is, Winnie Mandikizela Mandela is definitely a mother, not only to African people in occupied Azania, but to all African people as well. So that concludes my slideshow for tonight, and it gives a little time to spare. I see that High Frequency Beauty said that Fannie was a forcibly for Fannie Lou, she did not have children because she was forcibly and illegally sterilized, which happens to a lot of our African women there as well. So in the South and other places. Comrade High Frequency Beauty, did you want to say something else about
That's me. I love Winnie. I love Fanny. And so, yeah, so that's one of the, you we seen a lot of forced sterilization with African and Latina women by the government for the whole Planned Parent and
hood stuff?
population control.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. So we uphold all of these women. They are not just examples to other African women, but to African people. And I really stand by this whole question of this gender construct that places African women, that only like African women are only respected if they are by men if they're in the military, but also respected if only by the community if they're only actual child bearers. But the reality is that African women have sacrificed so much to improve the conditions for African people on so many different levels. And they've contributed so much, not only reproducing offspring, if that's what they've done, but they've contributed to developing society, learning, teaching people, young and old, fighting for liberation, establishing safety zones for African people. And this is the tradition that the African National Women's Organization is on, and what we hope to continue to build on as we move closer and closer to actually making the African Revolution. And I just want to also reiterate If you like this comrade hat, it's in our store. These are some of the
Look,
products we've created and designed by African women. Nobody can see that, Comrade Coco.
nobody can see it. There it go. There it go.
By African women. So, if nothing else, support that. Get your AWML swag. There are things there that for everybody, every person.
Even socks.
Yeah, even
I
socks.
just
Even
love the
things.
socks.
So, comrades, thank you so much. We'll fix
Of
the. We
course.
hope that you join us on Sunday, and we have all of our comrades up with us on the screen, and we'll fix all the connection issues, we believe. So, have a good one. Uhuru, we are winning.
Uhuru.
Vanguard up.
Vanguard up.